Welcome to the HMO Property Show, by investors for investors. Brought to you by the HMO Property Co, Australia's leaders in impact investing. Investments made with the intention to generate a measurable, beneficial social or environmental impact alongside a positive financial return. Catch us weekly as we discuss all things cash flow positive property investing.
Welcome back to the HMO Property Show. I'm your host Neil Gibb, and today I brought on Superman. It's not Clark Kent, it's Corné Wilbers from Prestige Portfolios. Corné, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Neil.
I seen you present about superannuation at Nitin Vashish's How to Succeed and Thrive Financially in Australia night, and I was blown away. I thought I understood what super was, and it actually made me realise I knew nothing about it. So if you listen to this podcast, grab yourself a pen, grab a piece of paper, because I can guarantee you're going to learn something new from this one. But we're going to strip it right back to the start before we get into the funky stuff. Corné, what is superannuation?
Superannuation, Neil, is it's essentially your own retirement fund. Now, I have to say that all super funds in Australia takes on a trust structure, and your super fund, like I said, is your own retirement fund where you and your employer put money into in your working life to provide for retirement benefits one day when you decide to fire your boss. Now, I just quickly want to say this because this is very important. Superannuation is superannuation. Yeah, all super funds are governed by the same legislation, and the one's not allowed to do all things that the other one's not allowed. All super funds must comply with the laws of the land. And when I say all super funds, I'm talking about different types of super funds. Because we talk about retail super funds, industry super funds, corporate super funds that you get from your employer, self-managed super funds. They all have to comply with the laws of the land. Mm-hmm. And the only exception to that rule is a self-managed super fund, which we'll talk about a little bit later in more detail. Mm-hmm. But a self-managed super fund can essentially purchase property directly, like you and I can buy a property, which no other super fund can do. And that is essentially the only difference between the two. We're going to talk about fees and returns and all those things a little bit later, insurance and all that. But there's no such thing as a bad super fund, and they all they're all good. Mm-hmm. Some are better than others. Yep. But it's all about the features that some super funds have. And if I say a super fund's better than another one, it means that they have features that are important to you as the member of the super fund. Mm-hmm. And some super funds don't necessarily have those features that are important. So, but as I said, they're all good.
Excellent. And I think now is probably a very good time for me to put in a bit of a disclaimer here as well, because obviously nothing that we say in this podcast is financial advice. It's all general in nature, and there's also a disclaimer in the actual podcast notes as well if you want to go there and read that too. But if you do want to reach out to Corné for a chat, we'll give you all his details and we'll put them in the podcast notes as well. So we touched on there, it's quite a regulated area as well. Why is it so regulated?
Well, that's a good question. I think, firstly, it's because employers need to make those contributions to the super funds. I think if it wasn't regulated by APRA or ASIC, not ASIC, the ATO, I think you would find the odd case where the contributions are not made to the super fund by the employer. Yeah. The system that's used by super funds in the ATO really works well, where the super funds report to the legislators every year what contributions did they receive for that fund, for what member, what type of contribution it was, and then when you as a individual at your personal tax return with the ATO, those systems marry up, and the ATO knows if they need to make government contributions for argument's sake, or allow you to claim some of the contributions that you've made in your super fund. It's a good thing. It's essentially a good thing that it's regulated. And superannuation, like I said, is there's no such thing as a bad super fund. You're essentially just saving for your own retirement. And I think one thing that's important nowadays, and we've heard this a lot on the news the last couple of years, is people are spending more time in retirement now than they did working.
Is that because they live longer?
That's correct, yes, because of healthier lifestyles and medical advancements and all those things. So, we always thought we spent 40 years or so in our working lives. People, I mean, there's a 90% chance that a couple who reaches retirement at age 65, that one of those at least will live until age 95.
Yeah, right.
So, we're talking about 30, 40 years in retirement as well.
So we need as much in that super fund as possible.
Absolutely.
So we don't outlive it.
You don't want to run out of money when you're in retirement. Eh?
Definitely not. We want to get the tool bag back out, do we?
That's it. I mean, while you're still working and you get made redundant, you can always look for another job. When you're 75 or 80, your money runs out, you're in trouble. And you'll have to adjust your lifestyle to whatever the government grants would be at that age. Yes, it's important.
Yeah.
It is important.
And the employers have to contribute into a super by law,
Correct.
Which is great if you're an employee, or if you're an employer, you have to kind of contribute to yourself as well.
That's true. Employers obviously get the benefit of their employees working for them and making more money and making profits and all that, but the contributions that employers make to the super fund of their employees is tax deductible for the company as well. So the employers do get a benefit for that.
Yep. And for quite a long time, because when I came to the country I was in my late 20s, I never really took superannuation seriously, and I had like 4 or 5 different superannuation accounts, money scattered all over, and I was just like, she'll be right. Why should we take it more seriously no matter what our age is?
I think I mentioned earlier, people should not underestimate time as one of the biggest assets. Compound interest, they say, is the 8th wonder of the world. So the sooner you get serious about superannuation, the better. And it's probably one of the most tax-effective investment structures in Australia. Just before we started recording, we talked about my advice to my son when he's reaching age 25. I said to him, at that, until you're 25, just spend your money. Yeah, because long-term planning for young people is what am I doing on Friday night. So spend the money, enjoy your life. But when you're 25, you're going to start putting money into your super through salary sacrifice or whatever the case may be. And I think we talked about $50 a week if he sacrifices $50 a week into his super fund, compared to someone who's putting the same amount of money into super but don't do that extra little bit. Over a 35-year period, you will have roughly about $1 million more than the other person. Yep. Which is massive. And
$50 a week isn't really a massive amount of money, is it? It's a carton.
That's a carton of beer. It's a carton of beer. Yeah, and I mean, you're not going to miss the $50 a week in your cash flow. So yes, that's why I say to clients always, also, get serious about your super early. Understand how it works. Understand the laws of the land, and it becomes a habit, Neil. If you do something continuously for a while, it just becomes a habit. It's part of your life.
Yeah.
And that should be the same with superannuation as well. So you touched on having, when you came to Australia, having separate super funds. I don't want to say it's a bad thing, because sometimes you have insurance in a super fund where you, because of your personal health, you cannot lose that insurance. So, it'll be stupid to say just consolidate all your super funds, but get advice before you do it. But the fact is that if you do have a couple of super funds, you're paying fees and all of that. And if you don't need one of those super funds, you can consolidate into another one. You can save on fees, because if you don't, it's as good as you throwing the money in the bin.
Exactly.
So that's something we see still quite a lot. Not as much as we used to about 5 or 6 years ago. People are aware of this. But it's, like I said, it's not always just a question of let's consolidate everything into the sexiest super fund. If you need that insurance and you cannot get new insurance, you have to consider that and retaining that fund.
Yeah. Excellent. What are the different types of super funds that are out there?
We quickly touched on it. We get retail super funds. We get industry super funds.
What does that mean to someone that's listening now that doesn't know the difference between a retail and an industry super fund?
An industry super fund is specific to certain industries, like CBUS is for the construction industry. ESTA is probably one for the retail industry. People working in a specific industry. Usually, the employer's default super fund will be an industry super fund. Retail super funds are super funds that you usually get through your financial advisor, where they have more bells and whistles and features and things that are important to some clients. Then you have the corporate super funds, which are the default funds of big employers, and then obviously the self-managed super fund, which is your own super fund that you set up for yourself. You're the trustee. You're responsible for managing that fund, and those are essentially the four different types of supers.
Excellent.
And like I said, the one is not necessarily better than the other. It depends on what's important to you as a member and what you'd like to achieve in superannuation.
Well, what should we consider with a super fund then? If there's something that's specific to you, let's say someone that's listening to this is 35 years old, not really considering what's going on in the future, because they're only young and they think that it's miles away, but it'll soon creep up. I'm 40 now, and I just don't know where the last 10 years has gone. But what sort of things should we be considering from a super fund?
That's a really good question. I think obviously the first thing that comes to mind is the fees that I'm paying in the fund. I don't want to pay a fee for something that I don't need. And I also see that in the industry, when it comes to fees, you kind of get what you pay for. Some super funds are cheap when it comes to fees, but it doesn't offer specific benefits or features to members. And also it's important to remember that, mate, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah? So if we start getting a little bit more detailed and serious about all these questions, things like where does my money go if I pass away? How much discretion do I have to say my wife gets the money or my children to get the money? Can you make these kind of nominations in certain super funds? Because not everyone allows you to do it in a certain way. So those are the other features. I think investment choice is very important. You have limited, in some super funds, very limited investment choice.
Yep.
We refer to it as generic investment options, and apart from choosing one of the five, there's nothing else that you can actually do about the investments. I think insurance in some super funds are important. Again, insurance is a bit of a tough one to talk about because we move into the giving advice space.
Can we talk about what insurances are held in super, not actually what they should be looking for?
Yes, super funds usually offer life insurance and total and permanent disability insurance, which is a lump sum insurance, and then income protection, which is also an insurance for disability, but it's more looking at temporary disability, also total permanent disability as well. But in some super funds we find we see a lot that you get the insurance benefits without providing proof of good health, so there are no exclusions or loadings on those insurances. And you're in a car accident and you hurt your back. So if you then want to apply for insurance after that car accident, you'll probably get a back exclusion or a loading, substandard terms, where you don't necessarily, that's where you don't want to move your insurance or your super fund because you have that insurance there without those exclusions and loadings. We also see that in some funds, as you get older, your insurance benefits reduce. So you keep paying the same premium for those insurances, but the cover amounts reduce in those super funds. So it's important to know what that structure is, because you don't want to be in that environment, and then when you're 50 you realize, oh my goodness, I don't have enough insurance. I don't know what's going to happen to my family if I pass away, and now you apply for insurance and all sorts of things happen. So insurance structures are important. Estate planning, I think we touched on that very quickly. That's important. Where does my money go if I pass away? Can I make specific nominations? Some funds offer very good estate planning features, and some don't. And then for me as well, something that I look a lot at when I do comparisons between super funds for clients is, does the super fund have a specific investment strategy, and do they stick to that, or are they, just going along with what the markets are doing? You don't want your super funds to be in a set and forget kind of strategy. You want to know that the investment managers are working in your favour and acting in your best interest, so that your funds actually increase. And that all comes down to an investment strategy that I think is important in super. So it's not always about the fees that I'm paying. There are other things that are really important for many people.
Yep.
It's not always about, like I said, fees and returns. I think if a client starts looking around at superannuation and maybe move their superannuation, they only look at how much am I paying for it and what are the returns of the fund. And although those are important, I don't think it should be the only consideration when looking for another super fund.
Yeah. How often should we review our super funds? Do you have a sort of metric that you use with your clients to say, let's do it every 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? Is there something that you've set in stone there?
I do have it set in stone for my clients. In my business, I review my clients' superannuation annually.
Yep.
It's important to keep track of what's going on and what opportunities are there. We haven't talked about this. There's a lot of tax benefits and advantages in superannuation as an investment structure. So, catching up with my clients once or twice a year is very important for me. Circumstances change. Clients, buy assets and sell assets, and it's important to look at it every year so that you know that on a continuous basis you're taking advantage of the opportunities that are there. The other thing is it's important to talk to my clients regularly to find out if there are changes in their circumstances, and if there are, do I need to make changes to their portfolios, their super funds, the kind of contributions that they make, how they make these contributions, can they get a tax benefit on these? Laws change very regularly in superannuation, so I keep track of those changes so that my clients don't have to. So we review it annually at least.
Awesome. And we mentioned earlier that our employers have to put a certain amount into our super funds as well. Yep. What about, can we put additional money in ourselves? Because there's some really good tax advantages which we're probably going to get into very soon. Yep. And this is probably where people are definitely going to need to get the pens out. But can we contribute more money into a super fund each year if we need to?
Yes. If you have a cash flow surplus, I think one of the best investments you can make is put money into your super.
Why is that?
Because of tax, Neil. A super fund is a person paying tax on their income, and just like you and I pay tax on our income. The difference is a super fund pays tax at 15%, where you and I pay tax on 34, 39, 47%. So by putting money in the super and only paying 15% tax on it, compared to your, let's say, 39% marginal tax rate, any other investment that you make with that money needs to perform at 24% just to be equal to you putting money into your super. So if you can afford it, absolutely, I'd recommend put money into your super fund.
And does that bring your taxable income down as well?
Absolutely, yes, because those contributions that you make are now tax deductible contributions for you. So you get the cash benefit in your hands when you lodge your tax return. So it's very important. There are limits in terms of how much money you can put into your super every year. So pre-tax contributions, the limit, we talk about concessional contributions. The limit there is $27,500 per year per person. Currently, it used to be $25,000. So the last 2 years, it's been $27,500. That includes your employer contributions, your salary sacrifice contributions. And then on non-concessional contributions, which are your after-tax contributions, you have a limit of $110,000 per year, right, that you can put into your super. But like I said, that's after-tax money. Those are usually strategies in terms of how you put money in and what kind of contribution you need to make. Some of the strategies that we discuss with clients, every year. Some clients sell property or sell another asset and make a capital gains, which they will be taxed on. So by making contributions to your super fund, if you're allowed to, you can offset some of those capital gains tax. So essentially, the question is: do you want your money to go to the tax man, or do you want it to go to your own super fund
and use it in retirement?
Absolutely, mate. Because once it goes to the tax man, you're never going to get it back.
Yeah, exactly. I remember Nitin opened up the night that where we both presented, and he said, "Creating wealth is not about how much money you make; it's how much money you keep."
Correct.
And I loved that statement because I was like, "Wow, that's powerful." And superannuation is a great way to keep money in your pockets and not the tax man's.
Yeah.
But can we access our super before retirement?
The quick answer is no. So there are conditions of release in superannuation. There's 7 of those conditions. You can look it up on Google. You have to meet at least one of those conditions of release to get money out of your super fund. Okay. So for everyone born after the 1st of July 1964, you have a preservation, we call it a preservation age, so that's the age until your superannuation is preserved. That age is 60. So for us, born after 1964, the first time we'll see money from our super is when we're 60 years old. If you grab the money out of your super in your own self-managed super fund, you're in for some serious penalties and strife from the ATO. You're not allowed to do that. That's a serious breach of superannuation legislation. Yep. So, unfortunately, not.
Okay. It's good. So up until the age of 60, we're in what we call accumulation phase. We're trying to get as much money as possible into superannuation so that we can minimise our tax.
Yes. And
also have as much money as possible moving into retirement.
Correct.
Now, the bit that blew me away when I saw you present at this night was there's the superannuation phase and then there's also the pension phase. Do you want to take us through that section as well?
Before I answer that question, I just want to go back to the previous question where you said, can we access our money before retirement? It's a good thing that it's preserved until age 60. I think because, when I'm 48 or 50 or at a younger age and I need some cash flow and I was able to take money out of my super, there'd be nothing left when I reach retirement.
Yeah, true.
So that's one of the good things about superannuation, I think. Now, as soon as you reach retirement age 60 or 65, and I'm always surprised with clients coming into the office, let's say aged between 50 and 60 or 65. If I talk about the pension phase of superannuation, they have no idea that it exists. It's just a separate phase of super. Many people don't know. Superannuation actually consists of 2 phases. The first one is the accumulation phase, where money flows into super with contributions, and then when you can access your money after age 60 is when you can move into a pension phase. Now, the pension phase is where money flows out of superannuation. So we see a lot of people, contribute money to super. They get to retirement age 65, they've got $1 million in super, and they fire their boss, and they say to their super fund, give me my money, I'm out of here. That money goes into their bank account, that super fund is closed, and you are now out of the superannuation environment altogether. So all the money sitting outside of super, whatever you do with it in terms of investing those funds, you're making those funds taxable again, the income that's generated on those assets, where that doesn't need to happen in pension. So pension is if you're fully retired after your preservation age or age 65, the pension phase of superannuation is tax-free, which means that all the income that you earn on those assets invested in the pension phase, dividends and rent and interest, is tax-free. Is taxed at zero. It's not tax-free. It's taxed at 0%. Apparently, there's a big difference. And then all the money that you withdraw out of your pension, paying yourself your pension income that you're now going to enjoy life with, that income is tax-free as well after age 60. So if you reach age 65, take money out of super, and then after that, find out that there's this thing called pension, you're going to be very unhappy because you can't get that $1 million back into super. There's not enough time. So that's a very important phase of superannuation is the pension phase. Again, there's some laws and rules that applies to pension. How you get the money into the pension, must come from accumulation. Cannot add money from your bank account to a pension.
Just got to go through the accumulation.
It has to go through accumulation, yeah.
Yep.
You have to draw a minimum percentage out of your pension fund every year.
Which is a good thing, because you've spent all your life putting it in there. You want to get it back out and enjoy it, yeah?
You want to now jump on the planes and go on holidays if you're in retirement. Yes, do that with tax-free money. And then also one of the other rules is you cannot have more than 1.7 million in your pension fund. But, I mean, you can have 1.7 and your wife can have 1.7 million. I reckon 3.4 is enough to to afford you a comfortable lifestyle. but yeah, absolutely fabulous phase investment structure when you get to retirement, and it can always, one of the benefits of saving for retirement, whether it's in accumulation or in pension, is you can always, if you put enough money in there, you can supplement your age pension with that, if you do qualify for a Centrelink age pension. So I found actually that in the last 18 months or so, where my clients, when they retire at age 65, they spend quite a lot more than they have to, which is a good thing, because you will in retirement spend most of your money or have the biggest need for income in the first 12 to 15 years, while you're still healthy and young enough to enjoy life, and jump on the planes and do whatever you want. But people start to slow down at about age 75. Not everyone, but most people start to slow down. They start to have health issues and spending a little bit more on healthcare and things like that. But that's when you can now probably qualify for age pension benefits. If you had a lot of money in super when you retired, you spend quite a bit of it in the first 12 or 15 years, and you still have some left that can supplement income in later years where your income need's not that high.
Yeah.
And obviously spend the grandchildren, spoil the grandchildren a little bit. But absolutely fantastic investment vehicle. Like I said, a tax-free environment. And the fact that the money's in pension, a lot of people, I think, also think that because it's invested in this pension fund, I don't participate in the markets anymore. You still have to invest the money in something, whether it's in a bank account or cash or shares or whatever you decide. You can still participate in
so it's actually still part of a superannuation fund. It's just what we call in the pension phase of that fund.
Correct. So the pension phase just means it's different access rules, as well as a different tax structure.
And then it's taxed. So after the age of 60, you're in pension fund, and you can still invest in things, and that any profit is taxed at 0%.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. If you're fully retired after age 60, if you are still working between age 60 and 65, the income that you draw out of that pension fund to your bank account is still tax-free, but the income component of your growth, so the whatever your funds are invested in, let's say it's all shares, the dividends that are generated from those shares are still taxed at 15% between age 60 and 65. That's if you're still working. But if you are fully retired and not gainfully employed, or any time after age 65, everything is taxed at zero.
Beautiful.
In the pension phase.
Beautiful. So this takes us back to trying to get as much money in there pre-retirement, and generally as we get older in life we start having better jobs, having higher incomes, and we said that the contribution is 27,500 per annum.
Correct.
And did we touch on the fact that if, for instance, we only put 20,000 a year in for the last 3 years, have we talked about catch-up contributions? I don't think we did we?
It's an excellent question. This only started recently, about 2 years ago.
Yep.
Where the government made this available, started from the tax year 2018-19. And the rule is where legislation says that whatever you missed out on your contribution, so let's say 2018-19 the contribution limit was 25,000. So you and your employer in that year only put in 20,000. It means that you have a $5,000 credit that's now available for you to catch up on later. You have to use your current year limit first before you can catch up on that year, and then whatever you miss out on a 5-year rolling period, you can contribute extra into your super fund. So at the moment, if you didn't make any contributions from 2018, so the 1st of July 2018, you didn't make any concessional contributions, you're allowed to drop something like $102,500 in super and get that tax deductible as well, which is happy days. I think this was a really good thing done by legislation, and you don't want to miss out on it. So if you miss out on that first year's contribution, like I said, it works in a 5-year rolling period. So this year is the last year that you can catch up on 18-19. If you don't do it this year, you'll lose that credit in 18-19 because a new year comes on. So one falls off, one comes on. Important again then, to have that reviewed by your financial advisor.
I was just about to say that. Yeah. This is the importance of having someone like you to review these things on an annual basis, so that people understand the changes that are out there, because this changes quite a bit. Like you say, the 27,500 has increased from 25,000 in 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't know what you don't know, do you?
That's correct. and no one's going to let you know, Neil. Your super fund's not going to send you a letter to say, mate, you're going to miss out on your catch-up contribution for that year, or your unused concessional contribution for that year. You can track it on if you're on MyGov and you've got the ATO services linked on MyGov. Somewhere there on the super tab, there's
the minefield, though, isn't it?
It's a minefield. It is a minefield. I can't even remember exactly what the wording is on MyGov, but you can actually go in there and see how much do you have available to catch up on.
Yeah. Excellent. And what about fees associated with the advice? Because you touched on something earlier where they can pay for the fees from the superannuation fund, is that right? And then contribute back into that super fund and then claim it as a tax deduction.
Correct, yes. So you're allowed, so if the advice from your financial advisor relates to superannuation advice and complies with the sole purpose test, then you can pay the fees for your advisor from your super fund. But I always say to clients, we're trying to get more money into your super. Yeah, that's the idea. So paying my fee out of your super and not putting it back is a stupid thing to do.
Yeah.
So if my clients then pay me out of their super fund, I ask them to put the money back from their bank account. But if you do it in the right way and make the correct contribution, that contribution can now become a tax deductible expense for you when you lodge your personal tax return, thereby getting the taxman to help you pay for your advisor. And I mean, in a lot of cases, that's a massive saving.
It's always good having the tax department as your kind of joint venture partner, isn't it?
It makes life easier,
Certainly does.
When the rules are there, as long as we follow the rules, we can take advantage of that. Yep. Absolutely.
Can we touch on self-managed super funds before the end?
We can. Self-managed super funds. Yeah, like I said earlier, self-managed super fund is essentially just a DIY fund, a fund that you set up yourself. You're the trustee of the fund. You're the member of the fund. Self-managed super funds must have at least 2 members. If it's individual members, can have up to 6. Or it can have a corporate trustee as well. And like I said, the only difference is with the self-managed super funds, you can invest in property. Super fund can go buy a property like you and I can. You're not allowed to invest in personal use assets. So I've had this so many times where clients will call and say, can I buy a caravan with my self-managed super fund? No, you can't.
It's an investment.
It's not an investment, yeah. So it's the same as any other super fund. On the ATO website, there's actually a lot of information on self-managed super funds. If you decide to do that, I think you have to have, and this will be my advice, general advice, is you have to have the time and the skill to do that, if it's something that you're going to consider. There's no minimum that you have to put in to self-managed super funds. I think it's like any other super fund. The ATO do suggest set up a self-managed super fund with at least $250,000. If that amount's not going to go into the self-managed super fund, the fees and costs that comes with it is probably not worth it. Also, if you don't want to buy a property, you can probably do better in a retail fund or an industry super fund than self-managed super funds. A lot of clients, I actually spoke to clients yesterday, younger clients, who said, I want to have more investment control, so I want to set up a self-managed super fund. You can have a lot of control in another super fund as well, which is cheaper. So there's a lot of myths, I guess, when it comes to self-managed super funds. And when you're considering that, get advice. I think that's very important. And do a lot of research. Go to the ADO website, read up on what they have. They have really good information on there. A lot of videos as well. But yeah, like I said, the biggest difference is a self-managed super fund compared to a property. That no other super fund can do for you. And if you don't want to purchase property, you might, want to do your homework and you don't have to necessarily set up a self-managed super fund.
One thing that's becoming more popular at the minute is cryptocurrency. Is there funds out there, not self-managed super funds, are there funds out there that invest in crypto?
I don't know about a lot of those, Neil, to be honest. Your self-managed super fund can invest in cryptocurrency. There's a lot of information, again, on the ADO website about that and how it's valued. Income that's declared on those cryptocurrency and how it's taxed inside the super fund. If you have cryptocurrency, you cannot pay pension payments, make pension payments to beneficiaries with crypto. It needs to be cash. So with other super funds, fund managers, we're starting to see some of the fund managers popping their head out with digital assets. I think we're still at the very early ages of it. I think a lot of people don't really understand digital assets. I think, some days I've read a lot about it, but some days I still think I don't know anything and how it works.
It's a landscape that's changing constantly, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. I think there's a shift from a shift to digital assets. But like I said, most people don't know what it is and how it works, which makes it a scary proposition. But like I say, there are some fund managers now starting to pop their heads up with investing in digital assets. I think it'll just become a new type of asset, digital assets inside super, or investments outside super for that matter as well. But it's in the baby phases. It's still crawling. We might see that coming on a lot more in the next year or so.
Yeah. Who would have thought we'd have been paying $3,000 for a JPEG, which is basically an NFT, and now there's people buying virtual land online as well, which I, even though I'm in the property space, it just blows my mind that someone would pay for a digital block of land.
Yes.
But we digress. Corné, is there anything that I should have asked you in this podcast that I haven't asked you about superannuation?
I don't think so. I think the message that I would like everyone to get from this is that superannuation is important. And it should be important from as early as possible. Don't underestimate time as one of your biggest assets, and as well, because the environment in superannuation is so regulated. And I'm not saying this because I'm a financial advisor, but it will pay to get advice in superannuation. I mean, one of the messages that I get most from new clients starting to work with us is, I wish I met you 5 or 10 years ago. I could have been ahead so much further. I did this and I made the contribution in the wrong way and I lost out on my tax benefits. So I guess that's the message, is advice is not that expensive, but it's really important in superannuation and pension.
And I love the fact that you're you work with Nitin in Nitin's office as well. So, a lot of my clients also become Nitin's clients, and then sometimes filter through to you as well for financial advice around this too. So, if anybody wants to reach out to Corné, we'll put his details in the podcast notes. And
thanks, Neil. That's absolutely fantastic. I might just. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm doing a presentation early in the new year. Again, on specifically superannuation and wealth creation. I'll send you the details if you want, and we can talk more on that.
Is that going to be online or in person?
It'll be in person 1 year in South Perth. We should be able to accommodate about 70 or 80 people at that presentation. If there's a need for more information, I'll probably do an online one early in the new year, and we'll see how we go.
Beautiful. Corné, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And I like to finish my podcast with a quote. I hope you like this one. It's, are you willing to live for a few years like most people won't, so you can live the rest of your life like most people can't?
That's a fantastic quote. Fantastic quote.
Join us again next week on the podcast. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you tune in the same time next week so you stay up to date with all the cash flow positive property updates.